So today we're going to start chapter 2. It's a pretty quick chapter. We only do a couple of sections out of chapter 2. The first thing we're going to talk about are some angle relationships that you probably know more about than what we've really covered. So first of all, in this chapter, we start coming up with rules, okay? And these rules go through a process to be accepted in the mathematical community. So first of all, they start as what's called a conjecture. So a conjecture is an educated guess. It's like the equivalent of a hypothesis in science. Okay, after we prove that it's true, it becomes a theorem. All right, so keep that in the back of your mind because those are going to happen all year long. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is called the linear pair postulate. So it says if two angles form a linear pair, then their measures add up to be 180 degrees, which again, we're not really surprised with because we've been doing that for a while now, but we're putting a name with it. If we have not talked about the word postulate yet, a postulate is a rule in geometry that we accept to be true and we don't have to prove it, or we don't have to prove it. So it's kind of like, a lot of times I feel like they're common sense things, like the segment addition postulate, okay, when we were doing segment addition, the angle addition postulate. All right, so I'm going to do a couple examples with you here. So on the first one, we're just solving for x. So I need to take 180 and subtract 56. I get 124. So my missing angle there is 124 degrees. On the next one here, we have expressions instead. So this time we're going to set up an equation. Keep in mind, because those two angles are supplementary, they have to add up to 180 degrees. So I have x plus 5 plus 3x minus 5 equals 180. So I combine my like terms. I have 4x, that's going to be equal to 0, equals 180. Divide by 4, and I get 45. So in this case, x is 45. All right, the next conjecture we're going to talk about is called the vertical angle conjecture. And some of you have already picked up on this, and we talked about it a little bit, but it's going to become official now. So if two angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. Okay, and I've listed here angle 1 and angle 3 are going to be congruent, and then angles 2 and 4 are going to be congruent. All right, so we're going to prove it so that can become a theorem for us. All right, so anytime we do a proof, we start with what we're given. So it says here, given vertical angles 1 and 2, we want to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So our first statement here says vertical angles 1 and 2. I can say that because that information is given. We literally just write the word given. All right, so now I'm going to start drawing some conclusions. I know, according to that figure, angle 1 plus angle 3 equals 180 degrees. That's because of the linear pair postulate. Okay, I can make that same statement about angles 2 and 3. Now, most of the time, we abbreviate linear pair with LP. And we don't spell out postulate, we usually write post. All right, now, look what happens in the next step. In step 4 here, it says angle 1 plus angle 3 is equal to angle 2 plus angle 3. So what happened here is that I had two equations that were both equal to 180 degrees. Well, if they're both equal to 180 degrees, then that means they're actually equal to each other. All right, so really what happened here, you have two options. You can use substitution, or you could use a transitive property. Okay, what's happening here is, if you remember back, like system of equations, you had like y equals 2x minus 5 or plus 5, and y equals negative 3x plus 7, right? And then to solve that, you would set them equal to each other. And that was called the substitution method. That's exactly what's happening over here. We had two equations that were both equal to 180, so I basically set them equal to each other. All right, now in step 5, what's happened is I went from step 4 to step 5, I removed this angle 3. So mathematically what was happening is the subtraction property of equality. So the subtraction property of equality. Now usually I write POE for property of equality. All right, so now I'm down to angle 1 is equal to angle 2, and then I have one final statement to make. It's Sorry, my boxes didn't line up well there. But it says angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and that is called a property of congruence. That happens when you go from equals to congruent and congruent to equals. You use the property of congruence. Okay, so from here on out, we've proven that vertical angles are congruent, so it is now a theorem. Okay, sometimes your book still does call it the vertical angle conjecture, and they'll refer it to as VAC, but it truly is a theorem because we've already proven it. All right, so I just want to do a couple of problems here to put it all together. So in this first one here, we want to solve for the missing angles. The first one, obviously the easiest one to do would be angle 2. I know that those two angles are congruent, so that would have to be 108 because they're both vertical angles. Then I can use my linear pairs here, and I can solve for angles 1 or 3, it doesn't really matter. So 180 minus 108 gives me 72. All right, so angle 1 is 72 degrees. Angle 2 is 108 degrees. Angle 3, because it's a vertical angle to angle 1, is also going to be 72 degrees. All right, next one. We have a lot going on here. So first of all, the 67 degree I see is a vertical angle to 3. So I know 3 has to be 67 degrees. I see angle 2 there is 90 degrees because it's got the right angle. Now I can use a couple of different options here. I know these two angles here have to be 90 degrees together. So I can take 90 minus 67 is going to give me 23 degrees. And then finally, I can either do a linear pair. I can do a linear pair like this to get angle 4. I could do a linear pair like this to get angle 4. Oh, you know what? I wrote my 23 degrees in the wrong spot here. It should have been there. I apologize because this one's already 67. All right, so I can do my linear pairs. I could also do vertical angles. Angle 4 here is a vertical angle to the sum of these two here. Okay, so these two put together, the 23 and the 90, would be a vertical angle to angle 4. So angle 4 is going to be 90 plus 23, or 113. All right, so let's answer our question. Angle 1 is 23. Angle 2 is 90. Angle 3 is 67 degrees. And angle 4 is 113. Okay, last one. I just brought in some algebra on this one. All right, so first of all, vertical angles are going to be congruent. So I'm going to set my two expressions equal to each other. So I have 7x minus 23 is going to be equivalent to 5x plus 11. If I subtract 5x from both sides, I have a 2x. Add 23 to both sides, I get 34. Divide by 2, and I get x equals 17. All right, so I know x is equal to 17. Now, the next thing I see is that I have linear pairs here. So I'm going to go ahead and find the measure of one of these angles here that when we just solved for x. So I need to take 7 times 17 and subtract 23. Okay, so if I take 7 times 17 and then subtract 23, I get 96 degrees. So this is 96 degrees. This has to be 96 degrees. Now, if I take 180 minus 96, I get 84 degrees here. That means that expression, 10y, I think that says minus 6, equals 84. Okay, so I need to add 6 to 84. I get 10y equals 90. Divide by 10, y will equal 9. So you're going to be doing a variety of problems like those.